صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. All praises are Allah's, the Lord of all worlds, and may His peace and blessings be upon our Master, the Holy Prophet Muhammad, and His pure immaculate Ahlul Bayt. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The theme is Sayyid Suluk, spiritual wayfaring. We spoke about huzn, sorrow, yesterday. And today, and possibly the following 2 days, we're going to concentrate on a number of mental emotions which, if harmonized properly, they can enhance the soul in accomplishing its objectives in Sayyid Suluk. But if these mental emotions are not carried out in harmony or out of proportion, then this will affect the soul negatively. Inshallah, today and possibly tomorrow we'll be focusing on the theme of khawf, fear. I'll start with a few basics and then inshallah we'll progress. The definition of fear is the usual definition which one finds in the dictionary. It's an emotion or feeling of being nervous or afraid, and it's when one's peace and tranquility is being compromised or lost. And usually we have this fear in relation to events which are about to happen, or these bad and unpleasant things which are about to afflict us in the future. That's where the fear comes. Fear can be valued from 1 to 100%. And this degree to fear depends on 3 elements. The first is how much one dislikes that future affliction or event. The second is how much one has acknowledged and appreciated the negative side effects of that event. And the third element is how far or close one expects that event to be. So, if you imagine one who is possibly facing imprisonment, here, naturally he dislikes it a lot because his freedom will be limited or confined. Or he's acknowledged the vicious behavior he'll encounter or she'll encounter in prison. And he'll know if he does the crime, he'll expect to go to prison very quickly. These elements, the more one understands them, the more fear one will have in relation to that event. However, if one is weak in understanding and acknowledging these 3 elements, then he won't be that afraid of that specific event. Now, in Sayyid Suluk, the subject, the traveler, which is the immaterial rational spirit, undergoes a number of fears. And these are all positive fears, not negative fears. We'll come on to the negative fears. I'll make a brief mention of that later. But there are a number of realms of fear. Ideally, if one undergoes all these realms, one will advance further in Sayyid Suluk. They're classified into 5. The first is fearing hellfire and punishment. That's the most basic fear. That's number 1. There are 4 others, more complex, more deep. But this is the first fear. One fearing hellfire, the punishment. And everyone has this fear. Even the imams, the prophets would fear the hellfire and punishments. But they had other fears too. It's not as if they're exempted from this fear. Everyone has this fear, but to different degrees and stages. And this fear of the hellfire, it emanates from one's tafakkur, how one understands what the hellfire is, what the punishments are, and so on and so forth. The second is fear which emanates from one's understanding of Allah's might and grandeur. The more mighty one understands Allah to be, the more submissive and more fearful one will be in relation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We'll speak about each of these 5 in detail. I just want to briefly mention them first. The third is fear of losing contact with that acquired divine presence you've actually acquired during your life. You fear losing contact with that. This is a very high stage of fear now. You've experienced the divine presence. You keep on fearing that this may one day be taken away from me. For example, the sweetness of worship may be taken away from me, and so on and so forth. The fourth is fearing not falling into sin, or fearing that one's environment can hold one back from Allah. Here I'll be speaking about this concept, the concept of istidraj, integration, where you're well integrated in the worldly life to such an extent you believe you're still on the track. And that's because the worldly life has tricked you into this belief. I'll speak about this later. And finally is fear of seeing Him. Now here I'll discuss one of the stories of the Holy Quran, the story of Hazrat Musa on the mountain. And then I'll discuss the esoteric meanings of that story and what it's trying to say, inshallah. Okay, so the first fear was fearing punishment, which this is for all beginners like me and you. And everyone who wants to start this Sayr al-Suluk, they have to have this fear. And this is attained via tafakkur. And there are verses and traditions which speak about this. One of the chapters of the Holy Quran, Surah Al-Ghashiyah, the overwhelming event, which is referring to the Day of Judgment. هَلْ أَتَاكَ حَدِيثُ الْغَاشِيَةِ, has the account of this overwhelming event come to you? وُجُوهُ يَوْمَئِذٍ خَاشِعَةٌ, faces will be humiliated on that day. عَامِلَةٌ نَاسِبَةٌ, laboring, weary, fatigued. تَصْلَى نَارًا حَامِيَةً, entering the blazing fire. تُسْقَى مِنْ عَيْنٍ آنِيَةٍ, they'll be given to drink from a hot boiling spring. See, these are things which one has, with tafakkur and knowledge, one reads these things as a start, and one appreciates it more and more. لَيْسَ لَهُمْ طَعَامٌ إِلَّا مِنْ ضَرِيعٍ, there'll be no food there for people except bitter cactuses or cacti, these thorny plants, short plants. لا يسمن ولا يغني من جوع, and these bitter cacti will neither nourish them nor satiate them from hunger. See, that's what I mean by pontificating on Allah's creation and His justice, heaven and hell. But once one pontificates, this is the start for one to acquire this fear. Also concerning the tribulations of the hereafter, in Du'a Kumail, when the Imam, Du'a Kumail was Du'a of Hazrat Khidr, and Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam narrated it for us. But there, where they speak of the tribulations of the hereafter, the Du'a reads, لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك. It only occurs as a result, the tribulations of the hereafter, it only occurs as a result of thy wrath, thy vengeance, thy anger. وَهَذَا, all this, مَا لَا تَقُومُ السَّمَوَاتُ وَالْأَرْضِ, these can't be withstood or held by the heavens and the earth. Ya Sayyidi, O Lord, O my Master, فَكَيْفَ لِي, so what about me? I mean, where am I in all this picture? How can I tolerate all this? وَأَنَا عَبْدُكَ الضَّعِيفُ الذَّلِيلُ وَالْحَقِيرُ وَالْمِسْكِينُ وَالْمُسْتَكِينُ, I'm just a lowly, base, wretched, destitute slave. What am I going to do? That's when we say this is what we mean. When the Ma'sumin read this part of the dua, naturally they already have the fear. Their supplication is for this fear to always continue. they also have this fear, but in a different realm to us. It applies to them too. We have a tradition where a Ma'soom says, أَسْأَلُكَ الْخَشْيَةَ فِي الْغَيْبِ وَالشَّهَادَةِ. He's asking the Lord to grant me fear, O Lord, in the open and in private when I'm alone. So this is the first route of acquiring fear, and usually with just reading the verses of the Quran, the traditions, a very preliminary standard of reading, one can acquire this, inshallah. The second realm of fear is fearing Allah due to His might and grandeur. Now here, this follows on from the first realm. It continues from that. After one's increased one's faith a bit, and he's acknowledged Allah more and more in this area, and his obedience has increased as a result, then this fear becomes more feasible, this fear with respect to Allah's might and grandeur. Chapter 16, verse 50, referring to the angels, it reads, يَخَافُونَ رَبَّهُمْ مِنْ فَوْقِهِمْ وَيَفْعَلُونَ مَا يُؤْمَرُونَ. The angels, they fear Allah above, and they do what they're commanded to do. This is with respect to the angels. The same rule applies to man. In chapter 79, 40 and 41, وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. However, those who fear Allah's presence, مَقَامَ خَوْفِهِ, and then it says, وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى, and restrain their souls from their soul's passions. This wa and this conjunction is a commentating conjunction. It's telling us what it means by مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ. So those who fear Allah's presence, وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى, and they've restrained themselves, their souls from its passions, فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةِ الْمَأْوَى. The heavens is their abode. And this مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ, I'm going to speak about this in a minute. But before that, there's another verse, chapter 55, 46. وَلِمَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ جَنَّتَانِ. And whoever fears their Lord's presence again, مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ. You see, the key here is fearing Allah's position, which the angels, when they feared Allah from above, this applies to humans. They fear Allah's maqam. Here the verse says they'll be given 2 gardens will be assigned for them. Anyway, the issue is this though. What does this maqam rabbi mean as this second realm of fear that we have to attain to? The answer is given by Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. He says, مَنْ عَلِمَ أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَرَاهُ. Whoever gets to know with yaqeen, with certainty, that Allah sees him, وَيَسْمَعُ مَا يَقُولُ وَيَفْعَلُهُ. Whoever gets to know that Allah sees him and hears what he says and what he does. وَيَعْلَمُ مَا يَعْمَلُ وَيَعْلَمُ مَا يَعْمَلُ. And Allah knows what he does, how he acts. مِنْ خَيْرٍ أَوْ شَرٍ, be it good or bad, but Allah knows what he's doing. فَيَحْجَزَهُ ذَلِكَ. This, such a certainty, such a ilm, will protect him. يَحْجَزَهُ عَنِ الْغَبِيهِ مِنَ الْأَعْمَالِ. From the sins, from the bad actions. This maqam, right, and the tradition ends, فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ. And this is what it means by those who fear Allah's maqam, Allah's presence. It's having ilm that Allah sees you, He hears you, He knows what you do, good and bad. Once you've acquired certainty in this field, then you have that Allah's presence before you. You'll qualify as someone who fears Allah's presence. Allah's presence because you know He's listening, He's seeing. That's what it means by presence here. وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى. So this was the second realm, the realm of fear which arises from that divine presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The third realm, keeps on getting more and more difficult, is that fear of losing Allah's attention to you. Here, one has to be always and solely focused on Allah. All one's actions have to be based solely and sincerely on Allah's desire and satisfaction. Here one sometimes even fears to approach others for help even. They have such a close relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they want to go only through Allah and the Ahlul Bayt, not through creation and creatures. Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he was about to be thrown into the fire, Archangel Gabriel came to him at the moment he was about to be thrown and said, look, I can answer to all your supplications. Is there anything you want me to do? Shall I put the fire out or anything? And then Hazrat Ibrahim said, from you nothing. Thank you very much, but from you I don't want anything. Yes. This is because if Hazrat Ibrahim said, thank you, yes, just make this fire to be cool for me, Hazrat Ibrahim would fear that that contact with Allah may have been compromised. So here in this stage, here one has this very sweet and good relationship with Allah and wants to keep it. One's constant fear is that this may suddenly get lost. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam has been narrated as supplicating in such a manner. He once said, O Lord, never abandon me to myself, albeit for a single moment. And he would start crying when he would say this. They would fear this abandonment. This is the third level of fear. The fourth realm of fear is that of istidraj. Now this fear, you're fearing that you may fall into this trap. Here, the person or the servant's worldly comforts and luxury can sometimes make one forget where one is actually positioned before Allah. The servant's been given a lot in the world. He's been given a good car, big house, he's been given so many good things. He thinks that all these, he must be on the right way here. By Allah giving him all these benefits and blessings, he thinks he's on the right path. But these worldly blessings and luxuries are actually distancing him from Allah more and more. Here in this fourth realm, one is fearing of falling into such a trap. He becomes satisfied with the things he has, and this can sometimes prevent him in reaching Allah and reuniting with Him. Even the Urafa can sometimes fall in such a trap. They do this set of a'mal, and they have these visions, these illuminations. And then with those illuminations they think, Alhamdulillah, this must be it. These illuminations themselves can be a barrier for that arif to progress further. They shouldn't be comfortable with these visions and what they're experiencing. So it's not only for this applies for all people. Once Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, was at someone's house and an egg had fallen off the shelf and fell on the ground at a long distance. And it didn't break. The egg didn't break. And Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said, this household is dangerous. Yes. Because Allah is not putting any test before them, not afflicting them with any, not even with the smallest of tests. Because if the egg would break, it would cause a bit of, problem. But it didn't break. Imam Sadiq feared this household. He feared this istidraj, They've integrated themselves so much in the worldly life, receiving so many benefits that Allah can get lost in the whole picture. So this is also one realm of fear that one undergoes. However, this last realm of fear, and this is in the books, I'm telling you what's in the books here, but I've never understood why they always give this story of Hazrat Musa alayhi salam with the mountain as an example of this last fear, and that's fear of seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what I thought I'd do is I'll first give the story, explain the external meaning, which you're all aware of. Then I'll give the esoteric dimensions to this story. And then you can judge for yourself why this should be a level of fear. Chapter 7, 143. وَلَمَّا جَاءَ مُوسَى لِمِيقَاتِنَا. When Musa alayhi salam arrived at our meeting place, miqat, meeting place, he was already a prophet. The ilmul yaqeen was there. Some translations have translated miqat as a tryst. A tryst is a secret place where secret lovers go and meet. Either a man and woman, man and man, whatever. But they go and meet there. Secretly. So in England, it would be behind the bike shed, for example. I don't know in America where it is. But look at the dhawq, the taste of the translator here. He's used tryst, which this love between Allah and Hazrat Musa, for example. So, وَلَمَّا جَاءَ مُوسَى لِمِيقَاتِنَا. When Musa arrived at the tryst, the meeting place, our meeting place, وَكَلَّمَهُ رَبُّهُ. His Lord spoke to him. So he also had Ainul Yaqeen. He would hear Allah's voice directly now. So Ilmul Yaqeen was a definite because he was a prophet after all. He also had Ainul Yaqeen. قَالَ رَبِّي أَرِنِي أَنظُرْ إِلَيْكَ. Show yourself to me, O Lord, so that I may see you. قال, Allah said, لَن تَرَانِي. You'll never be able to see me. لكن انظر إلى الجبل. However, look at the mountain. There is a stipulation here. There's a condition. There is one way you can see me. Look at the mountain. فإن استقر مكانه فسوف تراني. If the mountain stays put intact, you'll see me. فَلَمَّا تَجَلَّى رَبُّهُ لِلْجَبَلِ. When Allah reflected Himself on the mountain, جَعَلَهُ دَكَّا. He had leveled the mountain, crumbled it. The mountain had crumbled. وَخَرَّ مُوسَى سَائِغًا. And Prophet Moses alayhi salam fell unconscious. The same translators who translated the tryst for miqat, here they said Moses fell swooning. You know, swooning is when one lover falls unconscious because of the other party. You see, the taste here they're using. وَخَرَّ مُوسَى سَائِغًا. He fell unconscious, swooning. فَلَمَّا أَفَاقَ قَالَ سُبْحَانَكَ تُبْتُ إِلَيْكَ. Then he recovered from that state and he said, Subhanak, glory be to you. I repent, I return to you. Now this was the external meaning of the verse. One or two things I have to say here though. Imam Khomeini here said that mountain may still be there today. When the mountain crumbled, no one saw anything. No one reported anything. There were people there from afar and everything. No one saw the mountain crumble though. Only Musa alayhi salam saw the mountain crumble. When Hazrat Musa alayhi salam saw the light from afar which called him to go up the mountain, he was with his family. He said, which light are you talking about? We see no light. Only Musa alayhi salam saw the light. Okay, that's one thing I wanted to mention. Naturally, Hazrat Musa alayhi salam knows that he can't see Allah with a physical eye. He's a prophet after all. He knows much better than wanting to see him. So what is this seeing that he wants to do? And which Allah said, you won't see me, you'll never be able to see me unless you look at the mountain. This is how Imam in his Tafsir Surah Hamd speaks about this. And other scholars too. But this I've got from Imam Surah Hamd. He says that here Hazrat Musa, after attaining to Ilmul Yaqeen and Ilmul Yaqeen and Ainul Yaqeen, he wants to now attain to Haqqul Yaqeen, where he acquires all those manifestations of Allah to a high degree. So he didn't have this yet. In order to attain to Haqqul Yaqeen, Allah said, look at the mountain. Imam says, the mountain is the nafs, the soul here. Look at your look at your soul. فَإِنِ اسْتَغَرَّ مَكَانَهُ فَسَوْفَ تَرَانِي. If the mountain, the soul, is intact, doesn't crumble, because it has no traces of elimination. What am I saying? No, I'm a bit confused there. This is boiling water, brother. It's burnt my tongue. Yes, if you can give cool water next time. I know I recited the Tusqa min aynin aniya, but I didn't expect it that quick. Okay. Look at the Jabal. Do you want to see me? Look at the mountain. The mountain is the soul. If it stays intact, you'll see me. If there are no traces of the ego, you'll be able to see me. فَإِنِ اسْتَقَرَّ مَكَانَهُ فَسَوْفَ تَرَانِي فَلَمَّا تَجَلَّى رَبُّهُ لِلْجَبَلِ. Then Allah reflected Himself. The place of reflection, when Allah wants to reflect Himself on us, is the heart. لِلْجَبَلِ جَعَلَهُ دَكَّةً. He crumbled it. He eliminated all traces of egoism. Apparently there were still some traces. Although when we say traces of egoism in relation to Musa, that's something we may never understand, because it's so minute. But this is for our benefit now. We have a lot of traces of egoism within us. جَعَلَهُ دَكَّةً. Then he saw Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was able to see Him. وَخَرَّ مُوسَى سَائِقًا. Then he fell unconscious. The traditions of the Ahl Bayt on this part of the verse says, أي مات, i.e. he died. Naturally he didn't die a physical death. He died, that soul, that ego was killed. Before, Allah was saying, as long as you're Musa, you won't be able to see me, because of those traces of egoism. That had to go, that had to be eliminated. Then he saw, so he fell unconscious. Then he recovered. This is a new Musa now. He's now attained to Haqqul Yaqeen. He's now seen Allah as he wanted to. So this was one of these stories. Inshallah, every 2 days I'll give you one of the stories. Those stories which are relevant to the theme, I'll give you the external esoteric definitions and meanings of the stories of the Quran. Because as I said, Assalamualaikum. Yes. Come on. Yes. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. This is Jannah now. Yes. Okay. These were 5 realms of fear. All of them good and healthy, and we have to attain to them. That fear which isn't good, though, is fear with respect to the worldly life, with respect to people, fearing events, people, animals, although sometimes it's natural, that's okay, but fearing people, fearing failing an exam, fearing losing money, that fear goes against the soul, but we haven't spoken about that. Only fear which is beneficial, and we mentioned the 5 realms. So when in chapter 10:62 it says, "Ala inna awliya Allah la khawfun alayhim," there's no fear upon them. وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ, there's no sorrow either. This is speaking about the negative fear and the negative sorrow, which we spoke about yesterday. These are the negative fears, fearing people, events, fearing that, the FBI may just barge in your house one night when you're all alone or with the family. That kind of fear. You shouldn't have that kind of fear. You have to always be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And because I've heard some instances where the FBI have barged in the houses. Okay, sometimes, it happens in Iran too. They're scared sometimes. Things happen. It's due to their ignorance. When they treat you like that, don't take it that badly. Sometimes they're very fearful. They haven't understood Islam very well. In England, the police are much more gentle than the Americans, because they've understood Islam much better than the Americans have. But in Iran it happens too, where they barge into the house one time. Actually, one of the American talibans in Qom, his house was barged in, but the difference there was the police there were male and female. The female police ran in the woman's room, and the male police ran in the man's room. They charged in the house, and he was very scared. These things happen. You shouldn't fear it, though. Try to get a good control. Or in Iran, for example, I have to mention this. Sometimes you see them, they treat the Afghani brothers very poorly. Sometimes you see them charge inside the houses of the Afghans because they haven't understood the Afghani culture. They think the 1 or 2 cases of criminal cases, the masses suddenly think that now all Afghans are criminals, and you see them doing awful things. This is all because of ignorance. But whether you're an American here, an Afghan in Iran, or an American Talib in Qom, the more iman and tawakkul you have before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this negative fear will become less and less. Okay. Now, factors that, I don't want to step over time. Do I have time or? Yes. Okay. Are you sure? Yes? Okay. Now, factors that can lead one to acquire such a fear now. One is tafakkur. Here, the more depth the tafakkur has, the more fear it will lead you to have. Depth with respect to Allah's attributes, for example, Allah being Adil. The more you appreciate that Allah is Adil, the more fear you'll have. The Holy Prophet of Islam, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, said, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajjal farja. Ya man la yukhafu illa adlo. O he who is not feared save for his justice. His justice is something to fear. If you understand Allah's justice, it will make you attain to more fear. His wrath, understanding Allah's hate towards oppression, His hate towards sinning. So that's tafakkur. Muhasabah can help you to acquire fear, this positive fear, this self-accounting process. Because with muhasabah, you'll appreciate how little you've done action-wise. You'll appreciate how much your sins, how excessive they are, how great your shortcomings are. Once you acknowledge and appreciate this will help you to fear more and more. In Du'a Kumail, Allahumma adhama balai, my tribulations are great. Wa afrata bi su'u hali, my ill state is excessive. Wa qassurat bi a'mali, my actions are deficient. Wa khada'atni nafsi bi jinayatiha, my soul and its disobedience has deceived me. ولا تؤاجلني بالعقوبة على دوام تفريطي وجهالتي. Don't hasten me to punishment because of this constant negligence and ignorance of mine. You see, Du'a Kumail is very important. It has line by line, all these mental emotions are found in Du'a Kumail. Here it expresses how one should fear Allah. And this was only muhasibah can cure this aspect of it. Imam Sajjad alayhi salam said, خَفِ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى لِقُدْرَتِهِ عَلَيْكَ. Fear Allah because of His power over you. Because you're a nobody. You have no independence whatsoever. You're totally, all your existence is dependent on other than you. You're the owner of nothing. You don't even own your body, your nose, your head. Ain't nothing. Nothing is yours. Except your thoughts, maybe. You're not free to do anything. All the good you do is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'll explain that one, maybe tomorrow inshallah. All the bad that you do is from yourself. So, your body is weak, you're totally in need. Ya Rabbi irham da'fa badani wa riqqata jildi wa diqqata adami. Again, by reading this Du'a Kumail, one appreciates this total destitution that one has. One's in total dependence on others. Look at the adverbs used in Du'a Kumail, describing the nature of one's encounter with one's Lord. وَقَدْ أَتَيْتُكَ يَا إِلَهِي. And I've come to you, O Lord, بَعْدَ تَقْصِيدِي وَإِسْرَافِي عَلَى نَفْسِي. After these shortcomings and these extravagances that I've committed against myself. مُؤْتَذِرًا نَادِمًا, proffering my excuse, regretful. مُنْكَسِرًا مُسْتَقِيلًا, broken, apologizing. All these are reflecting one's total destitution and need before Allah, and so on and so forth. Reading Du'a Kumail on a regular basis has three important functions. First of all, it increases your humility a lot. And we'll speak about humility after Raja. Raja is after Khawf, inshallah. That's one of the main objectives in Du'a Kumail, for that humility to really increase. Secondly, it helps to eliminate the ego, to make you appreciate your nothing. That's why you have to read it constantly, if possible, every day. A few clauses, a few sentences every day is very advisable. Or once a week is also good. And when you read Du'a Kumail, for example, in congregation, sometimes you come across this clause, and the person who's reading it is now advanced forward. You don't have to always advance with the person who's reading it. Sometimes when you stop somewhere, which you attain this sort of link with this sentence, it sort of made you move a bit. Stop then, just think. I know that the reciter is now continuing reading the whole prayer. However, it's advisable to, at that time, stop and pontificate a bit on that clause. It doesn't matter if you've fallen back. Pontificating on one or two clauses a week is much better than just reading the dua from beginning to end without pontification. So whenever you feel this link with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on a certain sentence, stop there and try to improve on that feeling. And also it increases one's fear, this Du'a Kumail before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, I'll stop there, inshallah. I'll finish Khawf tomorrow, then the next day Raja, and then humility, and we'll continue inshallah. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين.